Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Manic Expression Digression session. With me, as always, is my co-host Martin.
And of course, with me as always, my co-host James.
Very nice to be back. We took a little break for December, but we are back, and we're here today to talk a little bit more about our process as writers
hmm
and what kind of influences we had that shaped us into the master storytellers that we are.
Oh yes, known across the world and the nation, our names have echoed across eons of blah blah blah, and then you run out
Yeah.
of words because I'm a very poor writer. But hey, I'll take it.
Yeah, so I thought that we talked a lot about the movie and we talked
hmm
about the process of making the movie, but we're both storytellers, and so this kind of a project for me is something that's like 35 years in the making. So, uh, what started you off?
I'll be honest, there was a time where I was writing short stories with my friends. Well, rather, they were writing short stories and it was going across our friend group, and everyone was going nuts waiting for the next installment. And I was like, I want to get in on this. And they were like, oh, come on, you can't write. So
Mhm.
what got me on the writing track was actually pure spite, because I
That
was
sounds
watching a
about
bunch of
right.
movies. I was watching a bunch of movies. I was, reading a bunch of books. So I said, wait, no, I can write.
Mhm.
So I wrote my own story. Now the thing is, they didn't care much. But funny thing happened. My stories actually started going around my school group, and they were all waiting to see what happened. So I started adding them as characters into the stories, and boy, that blew up. My friends didn't give a shit, but I was like, huh, this whole writing thing, that's actually pretty nice.
Mhm.
It gives you that hit of adrenaline because you're getting attention. Also, telling your stories, you know, is cathartic. It's like I
Yeah.
had this in my brain and it came out, and then they loved it. So I do a thing, they love it, they love me. I love it. I love me. Wow, that sounds pretty bad when you say it out loud like that, but I don't know. Maybe that's where most of us creative types
That's
go.
that we're all fucked up in our own individual, unique way, but also kind of the same.
Somebody love me,
Yeah,
please.
please.
Love what's in my brain. That's all
Well,
we ask.
why don't you love me, mommy?
That's where my value comes from. But yeah, so eventually what happened was we were making, little movies with our friends, and of course, the older friends will be like, "Yeah, we know what we're doing. We've been around longer." But a couple of my friends started noticing, "Hey, Martin kind of knows what he's talking about when he does these things. He has to set up the camera in a certain way and capture it, and all the stuff you're going, no, no, that'd be impossible. We have to do these other ideas." He's like, "No, he just figured out a way to actually do it, and also his dialogue sounds more natural and, not just snappy one-off jokes." So soon enough, what happened was like, what if you just wrote it down? I was like, wrote it down? You write down movies? Oh, a script. Right, that's a thing.
Mhm.
So I read a couple of scripts, and then when I was about like 16, I actually started writing one myself because I wanted to do another small movie, and I just got like a high 8 camera. So
Mhm.
finally, I could actually do my own recordings, and the tapes weren't ridiculously expensive. Because you could either get like the big honking VHS camcorder, which was always expensive, or you
Yeah.
can buy these smaller ones, which were a little bit less expensive because the quality was shit. It didn't
Or
look,
the
yeah,
early digital kind of stuff.
yeah. This was
Yeah.
around that time. We're talking, probably about 2000,
Mhm.
2001.
I
And
remember
so,
those cameras. Yeah.
yeah, so I started writing. And I got through page after page, whereas before when I was writing my short stories, it was agonizing. You have to write so many words. It's like, oh, I just got to page 3. Fuck. All right, I'll put in another 4 hours. Meanwhile, I whipped out like 5 pages on the lunch break, and I'm like, movie scripts are just empty space.
Yeah. So
I could
much.
I could get my ideas out so much faster because I don't have to worry about like the smell of a room, or like
Hmm.
the precise movements of what's going here. He went here and he gave him this look, and then that showed him. It's like, no, 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 none of that, because unless you're gonna read out that in like a voiceover, no one's gonna know what the hell
Yeah.
they're talking about or what they're thinking. So I was able to almost be a little bit more free. Later on, I realized that it's like I'm not exactly writing poetry, but I'm doing poetry, so it's like the
Mhm.
hardness of the better version of, or not the better version, but the sexier version of writing, um, is what I trained myself in, and it doesn't pick up chicks. Like that's one thing I'll always say with any creative types. If you're like going to be a musician, you can always pick up an instrument and it'll be impressive. If
Mhm.
you do art, you're going to be able to produce something and people are going to be impressed. If you write, you want to be that poet because you're brief, you capture emotions, and it gets it across. And boy, is that romantic. You know, it's
Mhm.
not romantic when someone says to tell you a story, tell you like a romantic story, and you go, okay, interior, hallway, day, school.
Mhm.
It's like, what are you doing? I'm setting the scene. Believe me, it's gonna get 60 once you know who these characters are and then get them into the same place. It's like, oh fuck. But it does help you tell your story.
Mhm.
And I'll get into more of what influenced me because I feel like it's going to go in a completely different direction. Because most people when they tell about their influences, it's like, oh, I was really inspired by, say, like Stephen King's a big one.
Mhm.
People read his stories because this King knows how to hit you emotionally. He knows how to pull like the scene, pull the scene forward and make the characters react to it. And each character is very different. So a lot of people were influenced by it, even if it's emotionally manipulative sometimes.
Which it
Not some,
is.
not sometimes. A lot. He's very
Yeah.
emotionally manipulative with his writing, but damn, he does it well, and that
Mhm.
inspires me. But that's not what actually inspired me. But I'll get to that a little bit
Mhm.
later. James, how the hell did you get the writing bug? Because you actually write fucking books.
Yeah. Um, well, I honestly, the very first time I ever wrote anything, I was bored. I was 5 years old and it was raining outside. And my grandmother literally just gave me a pad of paper to play with.
Oh, that's
So,
that's something that has happened in every family on every rainy day where they're just like,
mhm.
I'm bored with TV. I don't want to do this. I can't go anywhere. Fuck it. Here's a pen and a pad of paper. Use your imagination.
Yep. And I got hooked immediately. I also think my dad had a whole like library in the house. So that was probably a big influence, just being around so many books and everything. And my mom didn't like to read at all, so that was probably the part of me that wanted to piss her off. But no, it wasn't until 10 years later, like I'm in high school, and I had a very similar experience to what you were describing, where I wrote my first novel, which was probably like 113 pages or something. And but it started going around the school. And I actually was taking a creative writing class at the time, and my teacher asked me if he could read the book out loud to the class, and I would be anonymous until the end, and then I would have to get up in front of the class and explain like everything. And he did, like, every day he read like 5 pages of my book to the class. And it was me also trying to write way above like what I was like. There was a lot of, you know I'm gonna, and I will talk about this more when I get into what my influences are, but I'm gonna try and write this like erotic horror novel, and I am a 15-year-old virgin who knows nothing.
Spoiler alert, Clive Barker.
Yep, you got there. But um but yeah, I started writing screenplays too, because I around 2000 started to make my own movies. Actually around 98, after I graduated high school. I I and I would do this. I would go to Sears. I would put the camera on my Sears charge card. We would shoot as quickly as we could because there was a 30-day return policy. And then I would take the camera back. And I don't like this camera. Give me my money back. And I did that like 3 or 4 times.
Oh God, those policies that we all exploited to get
Yep.
shit very, very quickly. There's a
Mhm.
reason why they don't really do that anymore, except
Yeah,
some big box stores, and even then, definitely not electronics.
I'm the reason. But no, so for a long time it was just movies. I would just write movie scripts. I stopped kind of writing uh, books, and And we would actually go, I shot 5 short films and 2 features by the time I was 23. None of them were any good. None of them were any good. I think I re-edited one this year just because, okay, this was the best I ever did. And it's not great, but I've got more modern editing equipment. So let's see what I can do this. And I released it on YouTube.
So where did those stories go? I figure a kid at that time who's really into making movies, were you into actually making like something that would be considered more mainstream, or were you really into like the character development pieces where the story took on the shape of whatever the character did?
Character development.
Okay,
You know,
yep. Oh, you got hit by that indie bug in the early
yes, I did. It
2000s. Yep.
was I came of age in the Miramax and years and everything.
The
So
pretentious indie period.
during that period where I was like, wait, Kevin Smith made a movie for like $24,000 and it sold for 10 million. I want to
Mhm.
do that.
But I don't want to take his risk because that's risky.
Well, I took his risk. It just didn't pay off for me the way it did.
Oh, shit.
But yeah, I mean that's always been my thing as a writer is just I and I'm not saying this like sarcastically. I genuinely wish I knew how to write something mainstream. I don't have any clue how to do that. I even the my first novel, which Martin is currently turning into a screenplay. I literally sat down intentionally to write a book that agents would love. And there's a scene in it where an alcoholic has diarrhea and then throws up into the toilet. And then,
I cannot wait to write that scene. You have no idea.
and it's, and I'm reading it like afterwards, after I got my agent and everything. And I'm like, why is she having a hard time selling this? And I was like, oh, yeah. You can't really read this on a beach. But that's always been my thing is just I'm into the characters, and like you said, writing is cathartic. Writing's the best therapy. It's at least it was for me. There's lots of times where I will write something, read it back, and go, "That's what's going on with me," and it like came out in that way. And I've recently been just rereading some of my older stuff, and I'll look at it and I'll go, God damn, kid, calm down. Like, relax. But yeah, for me, I got back into writing short stories and then eventually in the novels. And I don't think I was ever really prepared to be the writer of the animated movie. I think I would have done it if nobody else would have, but I always knew I wasn't really right for it. There would have been that's the other thing that I wish that I knew how to write comedy. I'm bad at it. I can carry a conversation and be funny in a conversation. I just sitting down to write comedy, I don't have that talent. And I really wish because the first time we did a podcast play, I remember the comments where it was like, James, that was incredible, but now I want to kill myself. And that's a different kind of reaction to get from people, but it would be great to like, that was really funny. That made me laugh. And I'm just not any good at that.
I mean, not everyone can be funny. I like to think I'm funny. You say my work is funny. I
Mm-hmm,
think I made people laugh. Not just there, but when I used to run the show before, we always laughed and had a good time.
mm-hmm,
I take different approaches, and honestly, I think like most people who go into the comedy world, it's all just uh like like you want to get that reaction.
mm-hmm,
And laughter is just so easy. So you figure out how the jokes work. Some people make themselves the joke. I was never the class clown or anything like that. No, I was the broody 2000s guy who had the leather trench coat. Don't
mm-hmm.
worry. That's where I was. But I don't know. It's humor becomes like a coping thing. It's like I'm, but at first it was just making jokes, and just kind of seeing like testing waters. You push boundaries, and that's what makes comedy so great. Is that you can push the boundaries with different audiences and try to see like what works with what people, where there's crossover, and even like how to deal with society on a level. Now
Hmm.
that's a very heady way of saying you can make dick jokes to some groups and not to others, but sometimes if you change the language, they can overlap.
Hmm.
Haha, I just said a dick joke, but I didn't say dick.
Well, yeah,
And
I
then
mean, the one of the funniest movies like of all time to me, and but definitely of this century is Tropic Thunder,
yeah.
and a movie you could not make today, and it's not even that old. It's like
Yeah. That's the
15
thing.
years
I
old or something.
I disagree with that. I think I'll let you finish your thought, but yeah, I
Well,
disagree with that.
my feeling about it is blackface is offensive.
Hmm.
The only way to tell that joke and make that point is to put Robert Downey Jr. in blackface. There's no other way to do it. And the movie took those risks. I saw an interview with Downey from like just recently where he was talking about Tropic Thunder, and he said he was just thinking the whole time, oh man, this could be the end of my career doing this.
You see,
I I
see
just did
that
Iron
that's the
Man.
thing. Uh, That's the thing. Context is key with any of these
Mhm.
jokes. You don't want it to linger too long because then it gets uncomfortable. And you don't want it to be throwaway because it needs to mean something. And at the
Mhm.
same time, it's not just Robert Downey Jr. in blackface. It's you literally need that him playing a dude playing another dude. So
Yeah.
he's not Robert Downey Jr. wearing blackface. He is a pretentious asshole actor that everyone knows
Mhm.
about doing a method blackface thing that everyone knows is wrong.
Mhm.
Even the actor knows it's wrong, but he's way too committed to not to say no. And the audience gripped onto that. And
Mhm.
that's why whenever you say like, oh, Tropic Thunder, you can't do it today. It's like, no, it wasn't the blackface. It's because we knew that the blackface is wrong and
Mhm.
they handled it appropriately and made it hysterical
Yeah.
that it could work now, it worked back then, and it's the same reason why something like Blazing Saddles, could be made now and still work
Which I
because
just
as
rewatched that,
yeah,
which is also one of my favorite comedies.
the most problematic part to that wasn't the use of the N word or the
Mhm.
treatment of black people in that movie because it was shown that they were smart, regular people being
Mhm.
treated poorly by ignorant pieces of shit. That was the context. The only problematic thing in the whole thing was maybe Mel Brooks doing red face because it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of wrong. And we're
Yeah.
going to let you get away with it because you did something great, but don't do that again.
Yeah.
that that didn't age nearly as well. But yeah, but seeing an honest character's reaction to like people using slurs against him and then bringing it back around to comedy keeps that context so that everyone can enjoy it. And then and I especially love how all the ignorant people are just so cartoonishly
Yeah.
just off the walls. Come on, they get to a place in the middle of the road and there's like an arm comes down, is like 10 cents to pass at a toll booth. We
It's a
gotta go
cartoon.
back and get a shitload of dimes.
Well, and one of my favorite lines in any comedy film ever. Uh, are you crazy? Can't you see that that man is a nit?
Yeah.
And it's dancing toward that line. It's just getting close enough. I mean, and like with the animated movie, like a change that I decided had to be made from the script was, we've got the villains in the movie who are trolls. In context, them saying certain words that start with an R
Yep.
or start with an F
Hmm.
makes sense. But there were 2 points in the movie where I said the word that started with an R. And when you wrote the script, I didn't think any. We recorded the
Yeah.
dialogue. Even by the time we were recording dialogue, I didn't think anything of it.
Hmm.
And then it got to a point where I was like, "No, this doesn't feel right for me to say it." It feels right for them to say it. And if I was playing one of the villains,
Mm.
I would, I'd use the word because that's what makes sense. But in the context of the movie, for me to say it, it didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
So,
And during those times, I was thinking like, oh, it's a part of a character transitional process, so you can be equally as bad. But then I was like, nah, but I was doing that better in a different way. So when you brought it up and that you were going to cut it, I didn't give it a second thought. I was like, yeah, I probably should have. I probably had a headier idea than what was actually going on screen. So yeah, probably a good point.
yeah. But you're right. The context is really important for any. I mean, like I personally like to write about characters. I've always said I like to make my heroes less heroic, and I like to make my villains less villainous. I like to see like the spectrum of a person, and so you could be reading something of mine, and you could be going, "The fuck is wrong with this guy who wrote this? This, what does he expect me to like this person?" I'm like, no, not at all. Like I can write a character who will do the most horrible, awful things if you just keep reading. Like, I mean, the editor on my second novel, Don Giovanni, which is now available on Amazon.
God damn it. You couldn't fucking wait till the end for the plug.
Yeah.
You get
But
that's your one.
But I'm writing the story, and it's set in 1974. And the woman who was editing it, early on, she's like, you really should give these female characters more agency. And I'm like, can you keep reading the fucking book? Because it's 1974. They're not going to start with having that agency. They're going to get there. That's what has to happen. That's the arc that has to happen because it was a different time. And I'm not one of these people who will write like I've always said, it's a horrible thing, but I say it anyway. if you're writing a story about like the civil rights era in the South, and you've got the white Southern sheriff, he's not going to say, "All right, now you African Americans." He's not. You're gonna have to, and to me, if you don't go there, then you are downplaying how horrible that was. You have to go there in order for the audience, because otherwise the audience reads it and goes, "This isn't so bad. This seems like it was a relatively easy time."
Accidental whitewashing.
Where you've got a World War II movie, and you've got like I mean, and this is it's a little forgivable because it's a superhero movie, but that first Captain America movie, where there's a black guy and there's a Japanese guy, and it's like those guys would not be in the same platoon. They're not going to all be working together, and it's a Marvel movie, so okay, it's fantasy, but I've seen that in movies that want to be taken more seriously, and it just takes me out every time. Where it's like, no, give the actual proper historical context of what's going on, and otherwise the audience doesn't get it. The audience doesn't see why this was awful. And that's to me, my curse is I want to show awful things. I want people to be miserable. If I can bring them up at the end, I try to. But if it strikes me as, no, let's just go really dark, let's go really bleak with this ending, that's what I do.
And with that, we're going to take a quick break to remind ourselves what our original point was, because I think we were talking about inspirations. So I guess when we both said we'll get there, I guess after the break, when we come back, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
That, or we'll drive this car right off the fucking cliff because I refuse to turn around.
I mean, that is what Digression session used to be all about, was driving the car off the fucking cliff.
Oh, it didn't even last 5 minutes before. We're way more on track nowadays.
Yeah.
All right, but we'll see you and whenever the fuck you turn this podcast back on.
And we're back to the Manic Expression Digression session where we've done everything other than talk about the topic that we were set out to talk about today. So, influences. I will start with you, my friend.
Okay, like I said, mine is more of like a concept. I think I mentioned that a lot of writers will have like those people that they try to copy a style, or that's where they get their start. There's literally someone or something that gives them a driving force going forward. Whereas mine, since it was a series of events triggered by spite,
Mhm,
I kind of just took everything that I knew and tried to put it into what it was. So if we're going to go with some definitive stuff, we have the all the earlier movies that influenced probably all of us. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Star Wars,
mhm,
Jurassic Park was huge. You look at any of the Disney films back in the Renaissance.
mhm,
These were all big, beautiful, wonderful stories. And I wasn't thinking necessarily about the characters. I knew that the characters needed to be something different because, again, especially when I'm trying to make people laugh, I need to make sure that my characters aren't just two people who could be interchangeable, just throwing gags at each other. This isn't the 40s, and this isn't the 40s anymore.
right.
You can't do a Marx Brothers thing. It's not going to work so much.
Mhm,
Um, so I would make sure that I would have that, but I would try to string my plot along like these older movies. And one of the things that I would do whenever I'm writing a screenplay is I think back to those movies, ones of the similar genre, where as I'm watching them on my first go around, I completely forget where I am and I'm just so in the movie, I'm done. Like
mhm,
you have to like literally shake me to get out of it. Because if you're watching a movie and when you get to the end you go, "Oh wow, did you see this part and this part?" And we need to have a deep dive analysis of that. I can take away some of those things from my first viewing,
mhm,
especially when it comes to explaining why I like certain things. But that's not my main focus because I'm gone. I'm not thinking about that. I'm in the story.
right.
So that's where I go. So a lot of those earlier movies, ones that we watched growing up as kids, really influenced the earlier scripts. And going forward, like there was definitely some older types of movies that I enjoyed, but I didn't really look into the writers or even the directors so much for them. Like, I know I love John Carpenter, but I couldn't put my finger on why I love the thing so much other than it scared the shit out of me at the time.
Mhm,
But then around 2000, when I really started making scripts, a little movie called Memento dropped, and
mhm,
there was almost no advertising for it. I didn't see one trailer. There was not one commercial. I heard about it in my gym class. I was taking weightlifting in my junior year of high school,
mhm.
and the first time I saw that movie, I actually snuck into it because I was seeing something else, and I sat there and just blew my goddamn mind.
Yep, I
So
remember it.
he was, if you want someone who is definitively influential on how I think about writing, it would be Christopher Nolan because he's the type of person who really needs to draw out those point A to point B and make sure that everything's fleshed out in between. Taking those weird conspiracy threads. If you were to take any one of my stories, even the Manic Expression movie,
Mhm,
and you try to pinpoint what plot goes here and where the strands of each character goes, it looks like one of those conspiracy boards. So you'll be like, the red thread goes here, and then the crime committed up the street at the car. Oh my God, where's the missing part? And that's me. It's like, okay, we have the story going here, but we have this character going this way. How we need to make sure that they intersect, and it has to happen naturally. And beforehand, a lot of my older influences didn't give a shit about that. You think John Woo gave a shit when he had plot holes?
no.
No, just insert another gunfight. He's fine. Yeah,
Mhm,
Steven Spielberg. Let's go back to Jurassic Park. There's this cool scene where the Jeep falls down and,
mhm.
everyone is like trying to scramble out of the way. Exciting scene. And then someone pointed out to him, "Yo, how does that work? The T-Rex just came out of that pen. Did he fly?"
Yeah.
And Steve was just like, uh, eh, it's an
Yeah.
exciting scene. So that only takes you so far, and you need to make something groundbreaking, revolutionary for people to ignore it. I think more
Mhm,
people scrutinize Jurassic Park to the point where you can now see that it's not as perfect. Like, it's still like storytelling wise, it's basically perfect, but there's so many flaws that I could see if you were just a real curmudgeon watching it the first time, you'd be like, well, how'd the Raptors get in there? Or how did they in this scene they could only do that, so how could they jump there? Where did the T-Rex come from?
Yeah.
That big thing.
Well, I mean,
So
like sticking with Spielberg, if you, because I just recently, just the other night, I rewatched Last Crusade.
Mhm.
If Indiana Jones did nothing in that movie, the ending would turn out exactly the same, which is pretty much true for
Yeah.
Raiders as well. Like, if he was not involved in the story at all, the end of the movie would be exactly the same. And it took me 30 years to realize that, where I was just like, no, I'm just completely swept away with the story. I don't, and I've always said we, I think we're very lucky in that, like, if you were a kid in the 80s, you
Mhm.
got, in my opinion, the best popcorn movies of all time. And smart, like Back to the Future is a smart movie.
Mhm.
Ghostbusters is a smart movie. Um, and then in the 90s, you're coming of age and you start to get the pretentious indie movies. And a lot of us got into
Uh, God, in those popcorn movies, the 90s are the people who coddled everyone, then complained about how people were too coddled.
Mhm.
It's watching movies during the 90s where it was PG, even some PG-13 was painful because,
Yeah.
I mean, even Saturday morning cartoons, you remember when Spider-Man couldn't throw a punch? So
Mm-hmm.
he had to like figure out
The,
new and unique ways to web people so they punch themselves in the face.
the Ninja Turtles couldn't use their weapons.
When they couldn't use their weapons, and the first one was so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like they grew up with an edge and then got scared of that and then tried to protect us all and just made everything kind of suck
Yeah.
for like for 10 years until finally we decided to come back, and now we're having kind of like a surge of almost 80s like movies where some of them are starting to push things even a little bit further, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy having that edge back, although a little less problematic, looking at you Goonies. But but yeah, at least it's starting to get like more fun and more creative again. But yeah,
Mm,
that's what I didn't even take a sip of my coffee there. But yeah, that's kind of where I was getting at. Those movies are great, but if you start connecting dots, some of those dots don't connect. But at the same time, you had so much fun. Do you mind?
yeah.
But then I see movies where they do connect those dots, and it's like, oh, it's better. So I want to try to do that. And so
Mm-hmm.
now I am getting to the point where even when I try to get a simple idea, I want to just do the hero's journey. Here's Act One. Act One is
Mm-hmm.
going, okay, it's doing that. Oh no, everything's splintering. Everything. And before they used to just like ignore some of them because it's like people will forget about them. They don't need to know what this person did or how that interact. They were good for that and for that moment. And then this other character will come back and do something cool, and it's just fine because we're so into this character. And I just can't think like that any longer because of people like Christopher Nolan and more recently Mike Monaghan, who's doing all of those the Netflix horror shows,
Mm-hmm.
Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor,
The
and most
Haunting of
recent,
Hill House is amazing.
yeah. And this is the man who took um, what's it called? Ouija, that awful, awful movie based off a board game, and he made a prequel to it that was outstanding. He took characters, he gave them in an interesting characters in an interesting situation, took what should have been a lackluster, horror model, and just started connecting dots and making it all work. And he turned something that should have been one of the biggest flops into one of the most curious successes because
Mm-hmm.
he just knows how to do that. And I guess when we talk about influences, it's kind of like the forever student. You should have an influence to get you into it, but you need to keep having influences.
Yeah.
And it's getting funny where some of my new influences are actually starting to get younger than me.
That
So,
sucks.
because I think Mike Monaghan is about the same age as me,
Mm-hmm.
like 10 times the success, and he's about the same age, and he is now my inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I think about anything, whether it's horror or not, I need to think about how these things are crafted. And his it's actually kind of funny because his stuff has been slowing down. Like Black Mass, was it Black Mass? What was the last one
Yeah,
called?
I think that was
Yeah.
Black Mass.
It was a very slow, excellent story, but much slower compared to everything else.
Well, he
But
directed Doctor Sleep,
yeah,
which
which yeah, same thing.
the fact that he was able to take and make a sequel to The Shining, which sounds like the worst idea of all time, and I loved that movie.
Hmm.
I thought that movie was fantastic, and I don't know how he did it, but he somehow he managed to take the novel, which was a sequel to Stephen King's version of The Shining,
Hmm.
but to bring in all of the Stanley Kubrick stuff, which Stephen King hates, and to combine them into something that worked for everybody.
Yeah, and I think the funny part about that is what I think worked the most is he took some of those ideas from King's first iteration. The reason why he hated the Kubrick ones was because it was a personal story, and he
Mm-hmm.
just put that onto Danny's character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like he knew how to connect those dots, not just in the story sense, but also in the meta sense. Because I mean, you do have to connect with your audiences. That's one of those pinpoints. It's just up here instead of on screen. If I can make the best story imaginable, but if I make it so repugnant that no one's gonna watch it,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not going to go anywhere. Let's look at a Serbian film. You
Oh
know,
God. Do
I
we
still
have
say
to?
it. I still say it as a story. It's not a bad story. It's told in a very gross way,
Mm-hmm.
and some of its logic is a little fucked. But then again, I'm not Serbian, so I don't. And it's supposed to be an analogy against their government, so take
Mm-hmm.
that with a grain of salt. But as if you were to just break down the movie, it's not the best story, but it's a competently told story. But
Mm-hmm.
no one's gonna want to see any of the things he put forward. So if you don't take into account your audience, it
Mm-hmm.
really doesn't matter. And you have all of these filmmakers and writers who say, I write for me. Cool. But if you then go, well, why aren't people buying my stuff? It's like, well, what are you doing to them?
Mm-hmm.
If you're making it personal, that's cool, but don't expect sales.
Yeah.
You need to give them something so that they can relate to it, because then they can do what happens to like me, where I disappear completely from my chair and go onto the screen or onto the page. And I'm not directly reading words, just being like, how many more pages to the end of this chapter? Nah, shit, 20? Really? It's one of those books?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just go through and I hit a chapter. I'm like, oh shit, do I want to go into the next one? Because it will fly by, but I need to go to bed.
Yeah.
You need to be absorbed into the material. And that's,
Not
I take
everybody
a,
wants to read your journal.
yeah, exactly. And I'm taking a look at, a lot of the movies that are coming out, and I've been kind of negligent soon because I know that there's more inspiration out there. Honestly, I took a look at the Zootopia script, and it is the
Mm-hmm.
tightest written script I've ever read. And it was just pitch perfect, gave you everything you need to know, and not a word was wasted. Could not tell you who wrote it, but
Mm-hmm.
they've also become my inspiration because now I can see how a complex story can be told in a very almost poetic style. But again, like we discussed before, poetry and the sense of it is effective for the medium and not that it's actually like flourishing and wordy.
Right.
So if I copy the Zootopia script, I'm not getting laid, but I can at least write a better story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, for me, I mean, when I started writing, because I was, like I said, I was only 5 when I started writing. So the first 10 years of me writing was stealing everything blatantly and just like, and then Superman shows up and, um, and then something happened when I was around 13 or 14 where I rented the movie Hellraiser 3,
Did
which
you get
is
to one and
not
two?
a well, I'd had 1 and 2, but Hellraiser 3 is not a great movie at all. But before the movie started, when the trailers were playing, because it was a VHS tape, um, there was an ad for this videotape that you could order that was that I still have to this day. Clive Barker, The Art of Horror.
Okay.
And
Wow. Even had the props to back it up.
yep. And I thought, oh, I've never heard a writer talk about what he does. And that seemed really interesting to me. And I think it was also just, oh, I'll get like behind the scenes stuff about Hellraiser and whatever.
Mhm.
So this is back in the day where you had to like stick money in an envelope and fill out, the what you wanted and send it off and then wait and hope it got there because there's no confirmation email coming back to you. And you wait 6 to 8 weeks for it to show up, and it shows up in the mail. I took it. I went into my dad's den where there was a TV and a VCR. I put it in. It's a half hour long, and I walked out of that room a different person than when I walked in. Because you think, like I said, I thought, oh, they'll, show how they made Hellraiser. None of that. It's just Clive Barker talking about his craft and his inspirations and the things that he cared about. And it made me go, oh, there's a way to do this where I can, like, he said something in the video where he said, whatever you want to do, however dark, however erotic, however whatever, there's an audience out there for it, so just get on and do it. And that made me go, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to be him. And so then I spent the next 5 years or so ripping him off and like I said, trying to write these stories where it's like, yeah, I'm going to do like the dark erotic thing like Clive Barker does. I don't know the female anatomy at all, but I'm going to try to do this. And but he's still somebody who I still like. I haven't really liked anything he's written for quite a long time, but just him as a person was an inspiration to me in that way. And really for me now, it's the kind of stories I wish I could tell, because every time I watch one of these movies, I'm always floored by them, or the movies that are coming out of A24.
Mm-hmm.
Your Hereditary, your Lighthouse, your Saint Maud, Ex Machina, just these really smart, well shot movie. And whenever you watch an A24 movie, you're watching an A24 movie.
Yeah,
Like
and really creative too. So it's not just the same thing every time.
Mhm.
You're getting new and unique visions.
and challenging ones. I mean, like Black Coat's Daughter is something that you really have to pay attention to. Like, you can't be on your phone watching it and like looking up every now and then. You have to be paying attention to it, and the movie will reward you for doing that. And they're stark, they're minimalist, they're not they're a little pretentious, but at the same time, it's like to me it's a new kind of horror that they've made, and science fiction, and out of the old stuff. They've taken little bits from everything, from every era, and they've made something new with it. And those movies just continue to floor me. I try not to ever miss one.
And what's the next one coming up?
No idea. But
And
I
you're a
don't pay attention.
failure as a fan.
I don't pay attention to any movie news today, because that's the thing for me, is that, I mean, we're talking about inspirations. Obviously, when I started off like online, it was the angry video game nerd.
Mm-hmm.
This will make some people roll their eyes, but the first one I discovered was the irate gamer. And then, of course, all of the Channel Awesome people who we don't talk about anymore. So, and for years, that was because what I was writing was Stop the Hate. What I was writing was stuff for Manic Expression. And they were my inspiration. Like, I still have all of the That Guy with the Glasses movies that they made on
Oh,
DVD.
wow.
And there's part of me that's like, these do not hold up. They probably didn't even really hold up at the time.
No, not at all.
But when I would sit there and I would watch it, I'd be like, holy shit, like all of these people who I watch and they're all kind of in the same thing. That was really something that I had not seen before. And I got really excited by what potential there could be in people just making what they wanted to make, not going through a studio, not going through a publisher, not going through a record company, just making the thing that they wanted to make. And that guy with the glasses, or Channel Awesome, is now a bad example of that. But there are lots of good examples of people who just do their own thing. And if the studio doesn't want it, if Random House doesn't want it, they put it out themselves. And I've always, like I say, it's the least creative time and the most creative time at the same, because when I go to a movie theater and it's like, how could there be 3 different Marvel movies playing here? But then you'll stumble on something that is new and like I hated music for years. Like that sort of from like 99 to maybe like 2015, I hated all music. And then now there's stuff that comes out and I'm like, this is really good. This is something new and people are putting thought into it. It's not like a product the way that it was for that period of time. So yeah, for me, the inspirations have always been the kind of the rogues. Orson Welles is a huge one for me, because that's somebody who was just like, I don't give a fuck what you want me to do. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. And he ends up with no money at the end and trying to scrape together budgets, making these cheap movies, but he kept making them. And he'd go out and he'd do a wine commercial or voice in a Transformers movie or something, and he'd get the money and he'd go back and he'd continue to make Macbeth. And that's the kind of guy that I always aspired to be, was somebody who just did what they wanted to do, and and had faith that there would be an audience.
And remember, everyone out there, talent does factor into it, and talent is not just your innate ability, it's also a skill. Learn and develop those talents, because for everyone who wants to be an Orson Welles, there's always someone who's going to be an Ed Wood.
Yes.
And sometimes that's interesting in its own way, but let's face facts. You need a lot of talent to be that rogue that everyone looks up to, because otherwise you're going to be looked at as that fucking weirdo.
Yeah. You're Tommy Wiseau's and people like that. There's one, this is a little off topic, but I've not told this story and I must. Have you ever seen a movie called Get Even, but everybody pronounces it Get Even?
No.
Yeah. Nobody has. The most people have ever probably seen of it is this, when Red Letter Media did a review of it. And it's fucking awful. It's terrible. But it was made by this guy, John DeHart, who he was a lawyer who's like 50, and he decided he wanted to make an action movie where he would be the star and he would, get the girl and all of this stuff.
Oh
and,
shit, I did see that Red Letter Media one. Okay, yeah. Oh no.
Yeah, where he's doing karate like that.
Oh, and yeah.
I spoke to him.
What?
I spoke to him. I just one day I started thinking,
like nowadays, like, did you just call him up with the
like about
why
6 months ago? Because I started thinking about it and I was like, it was almost kind of for a lark. It was like, I wonder what this guy's doing. And I looked him up and it's like, oh, he's on LinkedIn. Okay.
Of course he is. He's a fucking lawyer.
And I just thought, reach out to him. I don't think anything will come of it, but I want to talk to this guy. And I think I was like the story that I used as the excuse was Hurt, my novel and the movie Martin's writing. And I thought, he's a lawyer. He scraped together money for this other movie. There's the off chance that maybe he could do that for us, but really I just wanted the story of saying, I spoke to John DeHart and he told me, yeah, when I was making Get Even, I want to call it Get Even, when I was making Get Even and we did this and we did that, and I'm like trying not to laugh the whole time. Um, there's a lot to be said for clueless people who make stories that we all laugh at. Um, I don't know that anybody's. The thing is, you can't set out to do it. If you
Nope.
purposely make a bad movie, it's fucking awful. It's the worst thing in the world. If you accidentally make one, it can be glorious.
Hmm.
But that's my
Actually,
John DeHart story.
it's actually kind of funny because there's a movie I just saw called One Cut of the Dead,
Mhm.
which kind of goes over all of this, and it's a little frustrating, but it's also a little brilliant. And I don't know how much I want to spoil because I actually think you, James, would actually kind of
Okay.
enjoy what this movie is trying to do. Um, you just have to get through the first 30 minutes. You're going to be like, what the fuck is this? Oh God, this is terrible.
Mhm.
Get through that first 30 minutes, and then it will immediately become clear what the movie is.
Okay.
Yeah, so go check it out, everyone. And next session we'll come back and I will absolutely ruin it. But I'll wait for the next episode for that. You have about 4 weeks before I
Mhm.
ruin One Cut of the Dead.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's on Shudder. So or you can rent it. I think if you have Hulu, it's easy to get like a 7-day free trial. So you can do that and cancel it super quick. But yeah, it goes over everything of like what is a bad movie? How does it get that bad? How do these mistakes get put in there? Things like that.
Mhm.
And it like I said, first 30 minutes will make everything clear in the last hour.
Yeah. I'm intrigued. I will have to check this out. But yeah, I mean, as far as like influences go, I think, and I'm wondering if you agree with me, it's a really good influence on you as a writer also becomes an influence on you as a person. Like, I mean, Mel Brooks shaped my sense of humor. The way I joke around, a lot of it came from watching those movies when I was growing up. Um, and or just the way I think about certain things um, came from reading it in a book or seeing it in a movie, hearing it in a song, and those things stick with you. And you really the person like I don't know that I could live as hard as Clive Barker did, but
Please don't.
I've there's some stuff he's into that I'm not, but at the same time, like if like I would put him in like top 5 influences of my life, including people I have actually known, and
Mhm.
he would absolutely be in that top 5. There's no doubt.
Funny thing is, I agree with that, and actually, it reminds me of why you shouldn't ever meet, like, not meet your mentors, was it? Meet your inspirations,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes we actually formulate what they are based off of their work, and it's inspired us to
Mm-hmm.
a certain level to achieve certain things, and then they come in, you see how they really are, and it pops that bubble. So
Yeah.
even if you've read online, you're on Reddit, like who's the worst person or who's the best person, and your hero actually lines up with that, if you get the opportunity to meet them, maybe don't.
Yeah.
Just because they formed you and you don't want that to suddenly pop. Like the whole
Mm-hmm.
Channel Awesome thing, everyone had this idea and then it popped and it made everything that you were trying to achieve for that whole time, it was a lie.
Yeah.
So like if you meet this guy and everything about you stem from them, your work, how you formulate thoughts even. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, if imagine you meet Mel Brooks and he just like shoots you in the face because he's actually more like John Wayne, then suddenly everything you know about yourself goes out the window.
Mm,
That being said, if they're old and about to die, I don't know, spend like $20 to take a picture of them at a convention because you meet them for 5 minutes, whatever.
yeah.
But yeah, It's kind of funny how those two thoughts went together in my head, where it's like, if they inspire you as a person, never fucking meet them, because then you kill yourself as a person.
Well, and even if they're not an asshole, I don't want to see Clive Barker sitting around eating Cheerios. Like, I have this image in my head of this artist and this like this guy who's just like like through and through, like all he would ever be talking about would be these old books or these classic movies. And then one day he's like, so yeah, I'm watching The Bachelor, and and then
Yeah.
it's just like, okay, you're a person, that sucks.
Why are you eating a vegan spring wrap when I imagine you put a baby between two pieces of bread and take a bite? How
Exactly.
dare you? You've ruined my life.
Or you've got three guys lined up and you're eating their asses. I mean, that feels like a Clive Barker thing.
Now I'll say, if he sits down and eats a bowl of Cheerios, has a glass of orange juice, and I'm watching him, and then he immediately goes over and like shakes the waiter's hand, pulls down their pants, and eats their ass, I think I could be on that wavelength.
Yeah, that'll work.
Sometimes life is a roller coaster. As long as you get something in there, as long as someone's ass gets eaten, it's a good day. I don't know how that contributes to anything, but it's a life lesson now.
It's just good advice, really.
Yeah, eat ass, enjoy yourself.
And on that note,
Mm.
we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digression session. We will be back in a month, and Martin can ruin that movie for you.
I absolutely will. No joke. You have 4 weeks. If you tune into the show and think that I'm lying, well, that's your own fucking problem.
Mm-hmm. We'll see you then.
See you then.